And I'm going to go ahead and kick us off. So, good evening, everyone, and welcome. My name is L'Oreal McGuire. I am the Executive Director of Student Services and Alumni Engagement here in the School of Professional Studies. We are so glad that you could join us for the third session of SPS Connect. This is the third in a series of 4 panel sessions with our SPS Program Advisory Board members who are leaders in their industries, and they talk to us on timely and relevant topics. Tonight's panel is on the power of influence, navigating organizational politics. Tonight, we will explore understanding and navigating the dynamics of power and influence within organizations. It's my pleasure to introduce our distinguished speakers for this evening's Fireside Chat. We have Jackie Pardini Hartzell, Head of External Communications at Ally Bank, who brings a wealth of experience in strategic communication and corporate affairs. Jackie also serves on the Communications Program Advisory Board member and is a DEAG herself, earning her MBA from Wake Forest. Thank you, Jackie, for all you do for SPS and for joining us this evening. Moderating our conversation is the one and only Tiffany Tate, the founder and CEO of Career Maven Consulting. Career Maven is a strategic partner of SPS, providing one-on-one career counseling to our students and alumni. Tiffany is a double DEAG, although she's more known for her expertise in career development and leadership, as well as being a female entrepreneur and in-demand keynote speaker. Before we dive in, you'll note that the session is being recorded, and we'll also encourage you to use the chat function throughout the event to ask questions. We'll have a dedicated Q&A segment later in the program, and then that will be followed by an opportunity to move into breakout rooms. So, Tiffany, you want to kick us off?
Thanks, L'Oreal. I'm going to quickly pin Jackie, so I'm looking at Jackie throughout the evening. I'm excited about having this conversation. When we chatted last week, we went deep around what are some of the themes that we want to get at tonight. So I'll just kick us off with a grounding question. Jackie, can you share a moment in your career when understanding organizational politics or maybe missing a key signal related to organizational politics had a real impact on your career journey?
Yeah, well, hi guys. It's so good to be with you all tonight. It's such a delight to be able to just have a chance to talk about our careers and leadership and have a chance to all connect together. Certainly I think there's so many times in my career where I've either done it right or done it wrong. And so I think there's a chance to talk about maybe both. But to jump in, I think one of the key kind of leadership themes throughout my career has just been like a sense of, bravery and just being willing to be kind of fearless in the pursuit of, going after the things that were most important to me in my career and what was most important to my teams and the businesses that I was serving. And so, I think often we forget to reach out to the leaders that have helped shape us throughout our careers. And so, one of the areas that's really helped me has been staying really closely connected with a wide range of different leaders at different levels across many different organizations that can help me sort of navigate different career moments and serve as sort of a mini board of directors, if you will, that can help me sort of think about what career steps I want to take and where I may want to go. And one of those times was when I was in a role leading a team that maybe wasn't getting as much visibility as I hoped that it could. And I thought we could serve in a bigger capacity. And we had a new executive leader coming on board. And so I was really close to her sort of deputy chief of staff. And I was asking about kind of the onboarding plan and how they were approaching it. And I asked if there'd be an opportunity to maybe share some of the PR strategies and how we were thinking about things and get time on that agenda. And because of the relationship that I had with that leader, she was really willing to do that and kind of sort of sponsor me and give me the time that I really needed to be able to shape an impression with her. And so she was able to help me sort of navigate that conversation. And I think one of the key things as you're thinking about, organizations is kind of meeting the time in the moment. And so I came with a presentation that just wasn't a glowing review of our work. was certainly proud of it, but I made sure that the work was really reflective of where I saw opportunity. And so I took sort of this brave chance to say, this is what I'm really proud of. This is what we've done really well, but I think we can do better. And this is where, with your fresh leadership coming in, I think we can make our team and our brand even more powerful. And that just left a really big mark on that leader. And I ultimately ended up joining her leadership team and helping shape the path of the brand forward. And it put my career on a different trajectory. And that wouldn't have happened if I didn't have the deep relationships that I had to be able to get the time, and then also being aware of like the moment, and being able to sort of read the room and understand that it was the right time to take a chance.
Awesome. Jackie, thank you for that. Some things I heard you say were, one, you had to establish a relationship first,
Yeah,
to navigate some new kind of organizational waters, if you will. Um,
sure.
and you put on your bravery coat and leaned into
Yeah.
what was probably a little uncomfortable, right? So I'm curious about, when we're thinking about organizational politics. I think in this moment in time when we're having this conversation, politics has a lot of different meanings depending on where you're seeing the word. So let's dig a little bit into, what does politics in the context of work mean? How do you define it? And what comes to mind for you?
Yeah, sometimes that word just gives you a little bit of that like ick factor of like, oh, I don't want to be like political or like scheming or manipulative, right? Like those can always be words that sort of come to mind when people think about organizational politics. And so I think you have to be aware of them and know that they exist. But I talk to my team in coaching conversations more about organizational savviness, which really just means like being aware of and understanding both the obvious and the things behind the scenes that may not be as obvious, to navigate the work and represent your team in the best possible way. And so to me, it's all just about like, being savvy, being aware, understanding, having the right degree of sensitivity, but maybe avoiding maybe the more negative side of that, political stigma.
Absolutely. I think of House of Cards when I hear the word politics, but
Yeah.
anyone else on the call watch that. I do think that you bring up a great point of savviness, right? It's something that you can't always see or hear or feel or have a very clear step A, step B, step C to get there.
Yeah.
But I think curious questions and being a great listener is foundational to figuring out who actually holds decision-making power beyond their role within an organization. How do decisions get made? How are people connected, even, which can come up sometimes. And most importantly, in the context of work, what matters most to the business right now, right?
Right.
I think sometimes we think about politics and we over-index on the people that we need to know, which is a core tenet of this conversation, I think. But understanding what matters to the organization itself and the viability of the organization, is a big rock for this conversation. Um, oh, go ahead.
Yeah, well, I really couldn't agree more because I think the relationship part is so important. And I know we'll spend time this evening talking about that. But really, I think especially in light of how much is changing in the macro environment on a regular basis, how much uncertainty exists in the world, like being able to truly understand like what's needed in the moment, being able to prioritize it, being able to quickly adapt, know who to go to and who to gut check things with, and make sure that you're looking with really kind of like a broad purview to things, is probably more important now than it ever has been.
Absolutely. Besides formal reporting lines, what are some of the informal dynamics or norms that you've had to learn throughout your career to navigate politics at work successfully?
I think I'm just a really big believer in being like genuine and authentic. And so trying to show up in a way that whether you're working with the most junior members of your team or all the way up to your CEO and C-suite leadership, like how do you just show up in your most authentic self? And I think that's been part of just sort of my ethos and how I've tried to just approach both my life professionally and personally, of just recognizing that you sort of have to meet the moment and be aware of your surroundings and on all of those things, but just show up in a way that is sort of agnostic of title. And I think try to gain the respect of people that serve in many different roles across the company. And you just never know who's going to move to a new role, the peer that may take on a bigger assignment, the more junior member of your team that may become a manager, one day in the future. And so I think you just never know when you take a squiggly path in a career where relationships will lead you. And so I think we sort of underestimate the power of like respect and kindness and operating in a way that, is sort of title agnostic.
Absolutely. I had a conversation with someone else today about the difference between being kind and being nice at
Yeah.
work and how deeply important it is to be kind, be very clear, and stay focused on what shared outcomes or mission critical work is in front of you. Because, as you mentioned, someone who's a peer today could become a direct report tomorrow
Yeah.
or a leader or influence what's happening at the leadership level. So, managing relationships all around you is so key. Um, I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about visibility versus value.
Yeah.
And in my work, I often talk to professionals about how being really technically acute, like able to do your work and do your work well, is requisite to having a
Of
role.
course.
But visibility is a big part of the formula for getting promoted. So, can you talk a little bit about the importance of being known and seen within an organization, even beyond your immediate team, and how that helps you navigate organizational dynamics?
Yeah, for sure. I work in a PR role, right? So my job is to promote the company and to promote our leadership team. And sometimes we joke within my own group that we have to like PR the PR, like we have to make sure that we're talking about the work that we're doing as well. And so I think this is one of those areas where you have to really be super delicate in the way that you approach it. But Jason, I see your comment there about brand is so important. Like this idea of personal brand and every moment being this opportunity to have visibility both in the small and the big ways. And so in my career, I've just chosen to make sure that the work stood for itself first and foremost, but that there were authentic ways to make sure that those that needed to know about maybe the great work a team member did, making sure that you had the right opportunities to present in larger meetings, the chance to, just send a quick note of thanks and appreciation for what groups have done and what, people have contributed to have been ways to elevate that profile. And then I also think that we can't underestimate the power of taking on like stretch assignments and serving in cross-functional capacities that maybe take you a step outside of your normal day-to-day job, so that leaders get more exposure to you, the way that you think, your strategic chops, the way you lead, the way that you interact with others. And so I think in my career, there have been a number of times where I've stepped out of that, kind of pure communications type of role and went and worked in a marketing one, or I took a rotation into a corporate strategy, customer experience design group for a year, and just a chance to work with different leaders who got to know me, not just because I, had a mentorship meeting with them, but they really truly got to know my work and what I could stand for, and that really elevated my relationship with them, where it moved from more of that mentor to like a true sponsor, so they could really talk about the work in the rooms that I wasn't in, and help open doors in ways that sometimes you can't get when you're just strictly visible, versus really showing that value.
That's awesome, Jackie. I think so. What I'm hearing is that the power of relationships is a through line in this conversation,
Yeah.
but there are different types of relationships that you might build. So a mentor might be sort of a situational support person. Maybe you're having a
Yeah.
difficult time and you talk to them about it, but someone who can really function as a sponsor knows your work, knows your work ethic, knows what your
Yeah.
capability looks like, and can speak to it when you're not there in rooms where it matters.
Yes.
And sometimes cultivating those relationships requires you to do a little bit more than just have a coffee chat.
Yeah. I think that I've never really been great, and I'm a little bit of like an introvert, and so never been great at just being able to like have just a good mentor, just talk for the sake of talking. I always wanted to do the work and like have the work show up that way. And so I think I've taken a lot of my, what started as a coffee chat or a chance to talk to someone about their career. I'd always try to find a challenge they were facing in their business or something that they were working on through that conversation, and then like follow up on it, whether that was like sharing some industry intel that I had, or an idea that I could help with. I stepped in and helped serve on like employee resource groups and other places that just allowed me to like show up in a way that was like doing work or contributing and adding value in a way that felt really authentic to me. And I think that helped me move those relationships from what you absolutely need, which is mentorship, but really what advocates in your career is that sponsorship element. And those were some of the ways that I think helped me do that.
Fabulous. Thank you for that. I often talk to professionals who are just trying to figure out how to push through this, what feels like an invisible ceiling. Like they're doing good work, they have some positive relationships, but there isn't a very specific next role that they're jumping for, but they're trying
Yep.
to prepare for it. So I love this idea of kind of boundary spanning through relationships and then also learning different sides of the business outside of your function as well.
Absolutely. The power of just being able to be curious, which is, such a huge asset to you in your career, and being willing to be brave and try things that maybe don't feel like, oh, I don't know, I've never done that before. I'm not really sure exactly how to do that, but to be able to do it in a way that you kind of build real relationships and grow. The other thing I would just add to that, and I think is really important, especially at a point where you're trying to make that next leap and push through to that next place, is just be relentless in your pursuit of feedback. And so I sometimes think that people will ask for the feedback, but maybe aren't ready to receive it. And so I think if you can take feedback as a gift and really see it for the value that it is, I think can really help. One of the best, mentors that I've had in my life actually came out of some really tough feedback. I was really young in an executive role. He thought that I wasn't ready and that maybe I wasn't fully, prepared to take on that role. And he had given my new manager some like tough feedback, and she had passed it along to me. And I sort of was like, I'm at a crossroads of like, do I just ignore this? Like he doesn't know what he's talking about. Like I definitely have this role for a reason. Or do I sort of try to embrace it and navigate that? And so I chose to just embrace the tough feedback. And so I asked him if he would get coffee with me. And it was probably like one of the hardest coffee chats like I'd ever had to sit through. But he had some really good nuggets for me in there. And so I was like, okay, I think I can work on this. I have something to learn here. And that one coffee chat turned into a monthly coffee chat every month for 5 years. And that relationship went from like he was giving me a lot of feedback to a mutual partnership to then like he would come to me when he thought that he needed something else. And this was someone like much more seasoned in their career, but it came from a place of being like really open and willing to take the feedback, to adjust what I needed to, and then be kind of really consistent in my pursuit of trying to get better. And I think sometimes we don't have all the people in our corner that are willing to give us the hard truth. And you definitely need that in that moment.
Absolutely. Wow. So one coffee chat turned into a 5-year
Yeah.
professional success partnership. I love that.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to switch gears a little bit. I feel like we've had some good conversation about the positive side of navigating org dynamics
Yeah.
and influence and power. But I also think it's important to talk about mistakes because sometimes when we fumble, we learn a ton. I think your feedback example is a good one where, okay, maybe there were some opportunities for growth and you took it on head on. But is there a time that you can think of in your career where you misunderstood or maybe misnavigated a political situation at work or just simply made a mistake and what it taught you?
Yeah, there's many, and I think that's part of like anytime you're trying to do things that are new or different, you'll sometimes stumble. And I just try to never make the same mistake twice, and just sort of embrace mistakes as a part of the sort of growing that I need to do as a leader. But I took a role in a new industry at a new company. I was eager and hungry to learn and to like make a mark. And so it's supporting a new executive, and we had a series of meetings to understand what she was looking for in a new kind of PR campaign and idea. Um, and I was so excited to bring her some like really fresh thinking. And we worked as a team. We pulled together some great ideas. I was like really excited about it. And she was like lukewarm at like the reception of some of these ideas. And I was like, oh, like how could like we totally like missed the mark kind of on this one. And I think what I didn't properly calibrate for was like time and moment. And so making sure that I had really thought about like, where is she in the course of this? And then where am I? And then where is the business? And how do you find sort of that sweet spot so that your ideas and your energy and your enthusiasm like match where the leadership team needs and wants you to be? Because not everything has to be like an A plus plus, right? Like maybe like a B would have been like exactly what the energy and resources needed in that moment. And so that was, certainly one that kind of sticks with me of like, have I asked enough questions in the upfront? Have I taken proper view of the landscape to calibrate our ideas and our thinking to match where the leadership team needs us to be?
That's so good. Like this idea of you could be right at the wrong
Yeah.
time.
Yes,
Uh,
yes, yes.
you could
I
be
still think
so
they were great
right.
ideas, but yes, it wasn't the time for it.
Yeah, it wasn't the
Yeah.
time. Maybe it wasn't what the business actually needed in that moment. I can definitely think of some times in my career where, I was a capital P perfectionist, and if it wasn't done right, I wanted everyone to know we needed to fix it. But that's really not necessary most of the time, especially in
Yep.
corporate, because things move so quickly, and what you think is
Yep.
important on Monday might be wildly different on Thursday.
Yep.
And that can be a little stress inducing, I think, but
Yes.
great call
Yeah.
out that you just really have to read the room, quite literally.
Like quite literally. And like a smaller example, but still like really important is like also understanding like when do leaders have like time in their schedule to take new ideas, to take feedback, like to be sort of that trusted voice in the room. And so like knowing the executive assistants, knowing the chief of staff, like understanding what all is on the plate from a prioritization standpoint. So you can time some of the, whether you're bringing new thinking or you have tough feedback that you need to share with someone in a diplomatic way, of course. But like all those things kind of matter into like timing really is everything.
That's so good. And knowing all the players is a huge one.
Yes.
I think, I've met people that will just skip past someone's chief of staff or their assistant because they might think, oh, that person's not important. And I'm like, they're very important. And they
Yeah.
know everything, probably more than you know in many cases. So
Yeah.
cultivating those relationships, not just for the work, but because people are people first, but also
100%.
work. Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
Okay, Jackie. So I'm curious about just how you, especially in the PR space, but maybe not only in the PR space, is how you maintain your personal values while you're navigating sort of corporate power structures and politics, right? I'm imagining there might be times where you might have personally not been a fan of, maybe disagreed with, something that you had to kind of hold or facilitate at work. How do you kind of carry those two things? I think a lot of our students are thinking about values alignment when they're thinking
Yep.
about industry changes. And sometimes our personal values may collide or be disjointed from what's happening in our companies.
Yes, it's a great question. So first of all, there have to be some like non-starters, right? So there's certain things that you just aren't going to cross the line on. You need to know kind of like where your line is, and there's a certain degree of like ethics and responsibility that we all hold in our organizations. And so if you're ever in that spot, that's sort of like a non-starter. But there's things that are a little bit more of a gray area, and I think it's important to know like which hill to die on. Like what is the thing that matters like most to you that this sort of you can't um get past versus like what are some of the things that you're like I don't love that but I want to like choose to see past it because no organization or leader may be perfect. And so I think really understanding that is massively important because leaders really do want to take the feedback. They want people to be happy on their teams. But you can't always just be like complaining about everything that happens. So you sort of gotta find like a way to like come with the solutions, come with the things that you feel most passionately about, and like know when to stand up for those values and do so in a way that's really like diplomatic and respectful. Like you can come with like constructive feedback in a way that is like solutions oriented with a positive intent and good attitude, and it'll get you so much farther than if you just come at it really hot. And so I think it's really important to understand. And then I think that sometimes we don't ask for what we need. And so I can use, my example in my career of, when I became a working parent, it would totally changed my values system and like amount of time I wanted to put into work. I literally had to be in two places at once. There were things that were happening that I suddenly like the work part wasn't the most important part anymore. And for the early part of, my early motherhood, I was like, I'm not really sure. Like I just would sort of suffer through it silently. And I sort of felt like my personal values in attack with like what I wanted out of my job. And then, I have an amazing boss today, and she was like, you just need to ask, like, you can't make the trip, or you can't make the dinner, or you have this personal priority at home. Like, you just gotta own that. And that's like 100% okay. And as long as you're like showing up in work, you're thriving, you're doing good, and you're putting this own like personal pressure on yourself. And so I think part of it is like knowing where your own boundaries are and being, start to be more willing to just ask for what you need. And I think you'd be surprised by the answer that you get kind of back in return. And I wish I maybe would have listened to that advice sooner. She talks a lot about just like embrace the slop, right? Like let go of that capital P perfectionism a little bit, like embrace the messy areas of life because that's where all the magic happens. And so having a leader like Andrea has been just so tremendous for me because it sort of allowed me to be like more creative at work, to have more freedom and independence, but kind of like more on my terms. So I'm not like missing bedtime or like not showing up for my family in the way that I want to. So it kind of worked out really great on both ends. But had I not been like brave enough to ask for what I needed, I might not have gotten the answer that I wanted.
That's so good. And I love also how you kind of speak to this dichotomy of being brave and asking for what you need, but making sure it's solution aligned, you know? I think
Yes.
in the age of social media, sometimes we like consume all this content about workplace
Yeah.
culture in oh, it's A or B. And it's like, really, it's somewhere in the middle. Um,
Hmm.
I want to do excellent work. And also, if I'm pumping every 3 hours, you're not going to see me. You're just not going
Yeah.
to see me. Motherhood is a very humbling time, I will say.
It
Uh,
absolutely is.
yeah, but even if you are not a parent on the call, I think just we have different seasons of life. Maybe you're caregiving up, you're caring for a parent, or you have a personal challenge or whatever it is, right? It could be
Yeah.
something super
Yeah.
positive.
Or you're in school in the evenings, right? Like all the things that you're doing. And I think what I also think I underestimated as a leader of a team was what that did for the my teammates. So they suddenly were able to show up in their life in their most fullest way. And that was probably I didn't realize how close people were paying attention. And so I also now just talk about it openly of like, hey, like I'm gonna have to leave early to go to the pick up my kids from school or to get to ballet class, or I'm gonna have to not be on that trip because it's, tea with mom, or I've got to like take care of my mom, and do something with her and just like be really open about it. And I think that's allowed the team the same degree of freedom. And I've actually seen more commitment in work as a result, but just more integrated into their life the way that it needed to be.
Yeah, that's so good. Okay. So next question. We have, let's call them emerging leaders potentially on the call. Either they are emerging leaders stepping into an executive level seat, or maybe they are stepping into a new type of business. What advice would you give someone who wants to grow their influence at work, but isn't sure where to start?
So I would first make sure that you are a student of the business. So you clearly are here tonight because you're passionate about learning. You obviously have a high degree of curiosity and willingness to learn. Like bring that same spirit to the business, and that may look like reaching out to a leader who you don't know a lot about their business line, or to someone else in the organization that is doing some new and interesting things in AI or in innovation, and find a way to like authentically contribute your skills and talents to the work and problems that the business is trying to solve, and to make sure you're working on the things that are most impactful. We talk about it being like, are you working on, the moments that matter? Are you doing the things that are really going to drive the business forward? And so making that looks like, visible projects, working with the right leaders that can learn about you and your team. And then are you bringing people along for that journey, and sort of ensuring that your team is getting that same degree of, visibility and integration, and people are paying, are going to pay attention to how you bring people along for the ride.
Nice. Jackie, what is one myth about organizational politics that you'd like to debunk?
It kind of goes back to what we were talking about a little bit earlier. But I don't think it's a bad term. Like, I think it's just a reality of working in, corporate America, and that you don't have to, it's not a negative if you're aware of and working through it. And so just find a way to do so on your like authentic terms.
Nice. Okay, last question before we transition to audience Q&A. This has been so good. How do you approach managing up in a way that builds mutual trust and influence? Like, let's say you have a new leader that you are reporting into. What are some of the first things that you would do to start establishing trust with that person? Because that relationship is typically pretty critical to driving your.
So it's so important. I think first and foremost, you want to make sure that they understand like who you are, what you value, what you bring to the table, but also for you to understand them and like what their values are, what motivates them, what are their biggest challenges, so that you kind of start on a similar ground of like we understand who we are as individuals, we come from a place of mutual respect for one another, and that we're aligned and prioritized in the challenges that we're going after together to solve. And so I just had a new leader join my team, and we started with just like a joining up document of like here's who we are, here's my career background, here's what I value in my life, here's a little bit about what I do personally, here's what I am looking for in my career, this is what I think my super skills are, my superpowers. And we both filled one out and we like talked about it. And it was just a really good grounding conversation of like understanding one another and not just assuming because we had worked together in different capacities that we knew all those things. Like we took the time to really like understand each other as people, and then being really clear on like what is our North Star on like what does success look like? Are we all rowing in the same direction and supporting one another in our goals and what the organization needs? And so I think if you can come at it early from a place of like respect and good prioritization and shared what's our shared success look like, then I think those relationships start out in the best way. And then no matter you celebrate the wins, but no matter what, like be honest about the mistakes, right? And so I think leaders will really respect those, especially new relationships where you're honest and giving like real assessment of like what's working well, where you need their help, where maybe things haven't gone as well as you had hoped they would, but you want to, this is how you need to solve it. And these are maybe the resources or the ideas you have to bring that to fruition and be more successful. I think all of that can just go a long way in building that trust.
Wonderful. Thank you. So before we transition to audience Q&A, I did capture a few nuggets for folks who are taking notes or might be watching this later. Sort of rules of the road from Jackie for navigating org politics. So first I captured that you just have to be brave because you aren't always going to get it right. And sometimes the mistakes are part of the learning. Sponsorship is a next level to mentorship relationship that we all need to be successful at work. And it's going to take more than just one coffee to cultivate that relationship. People need to actually see you do good work. Diplomacy and problem solving are critical if you're highlighting challenges or gaps or problems that you see. If you're going to complain, you've got to also have a solution in your hand, maybe two solutions to present. Um, the North Star of the business is most critical for navigating organizational politics because everything ties to the North Star. We have a shared mission, the company has a bottom line or a focus, and if you're clear on what that is, you can probably go really far. And if you're new to a business or new to a role within an organization, making sure that you are clear on what the North Star is and that your people, whether that's your leader, the people that report to you, or your peers, are all on the same page for what that is. So okay, and then I wrote down this be a student of the business. That is my favorite thing to tell people. I'm like, you got a job, that's excellent. But now you need to be a student of the business to do a good job. So I love that. And I captured so many more notes about like macro environment, the timing of where you are, all of that. And I'm going to be studying them for a while. But I do want to open it up to the audience. But first, thank you, Jackie, for having this conversation. Um,
Nice.
it's delightful just to hear your perspective and learn a little bit about your experience. Um, I'm going to transition it over to our SPS leader friends to see if any questions have come through either in the chat or at registration.
So I am looking at the chat. I'm not seeing anything yet. Chris, if you could share if there were any submitted during registration, and that gives our students some time to type as you're looking.
While Chris is looking, Jackie, I do have a question for you.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if there's anything, if you could imagine like your first day at Ally, is there anything that you would have done differently based on what you know now?
I um I do think like just taking more time early to make sure you're really understanding the business before you immediately jump in. We definitely did that, but the speed and pace at which we were moving was really fast. And so I think I just want to underscore that point of like that's not just like a one and done in your first 90 days. You have to be like constantly learning and evolving. And so I think just putting that into like kind of hypercharging that a little bit. The things that I think as we were going about a transformation of my team, that worked really well that I would absolutely do again in a new job was bringing people along for that journey. And so we had a lot of just like strategy sessions of like, what do we want our team to be? How do we get rallied around a mission? What are the things that we want to like start, stop, continue, right? But be very intentional about listening to the team, understanding where they were at, as well as all of our business clients. So I could get their perspectives as well and bring that feedback to those sessions with my new leadership team, and that we charted the path together versus it being like my path that I just pushed down. And I think that getting that buy-in and fostering a sense of like we have this shared accountability now and we're going to set like a very clear goal was essential. And so, we talked about like, hey, what does success look like? And we had a number of, metrics and measures. And one of our teammates was like, we're going to win an award. It was like the best PR team in the country. And I was like, okay, I love that. Like, let's put it on the board. And, we wrote it down. It was in our measures of like, in the next, um, you know, 5 years we want to win an award, and we did it in two. And so it was just like one of those things where then you could like the team could feel it as like this really tangible result of like not only were the numbers and the metrics improving, but you're getting sort of like the industry view of it, and that all came from like the team in that moment. And I think it was like one of my proudest moments in my career was just seeing how this group had like completely transformed, and we're not done yet, which is like the coolest journey. So
Awesome. Congratulations on the early award. I do see a question in the chat from Jason. Jason says, not every leader is invested in your career. How do you market yourself so more people know your capabilities to increase your visibility?
yeah, it's a really important part of making sure that people can sometimes only see you for what they've known you to work on or see you in a very narrow lane. And it is a real it is sometimes a real challenge. And I think even more so in this virtual environment that we find ourselves in, where you might not get as much FaceTime outside of sort of like these intermittent kind of like, Zoom sessions. And so I do think FaceTime matters, and being visible and present and like showing up in different ways goes a really long way. But I think for me, it's about when I'm having career development conversations, whether that's with, my mentor, both inside and outside of the company, or with my manager, sometimes even just like reminding them of like, hey, like these are the things I'm really proud of. These are the skills that I'm continuing to work on. I have a lot of experience in XYZ, space. So if I can ever help you in that area, or if you need anything, like just a reminder sometimes of like who you are, what you're about, can help people kind of keep you top of mind as like talent planning conversations are happening, or even just being thoughtful about like raising your hand for like a tough assignment. There's been a number of times where throughout my career I take on the job that nobody else wanted to take on because it was messy, or people didn't think it was visible enough, or it was outside of their normal skill set. And I'd be like, I'll try it. Like I would just like raise my hand and be like, I think I can do this, and helping people see me for maybe the skills that I didn't always just display in my day-to-day job. And so for me, it was a lot of like rotations, some critical stretch assignments where I served in a cross-functional capacity with a lot of different leaders that really helped sort of build my network of people that didn't just see me as like the PR person. They saw me as like a strategist, as someone who could really help solve business problems. And that came through the intentionality around what work assignments I took on and what I was willing to do that maybe nobody else wanted to.
Mm. Jackie, Tristan says, are there any specific strategies or communication you rely on when you have to work with another team that you have limited experience with, so that you can complete your shared goals despite having different backgrounds?
Yeah. So I think oftentimes we jump straight to the work, and don't take the time to like really align at the onset of like, what are our shared goals? Whose roles and responsibilities are where? What different backgrounds do people bring to a project that might be additive to the overall group? And so, anytime that I'm working or leading a cross-functional assignment, I try to bring a lot of it, a lot of different minds together from different teams, different backgrounds, and honestly, like, even just be like, okay, like let's like introduce ourselves, like let's talk, like kind of do a little bit of like team formation, whether that's through informal or formal ways, and just depends on how big the project is. It could be a simple, just introductions in a meeting, or if it's going to be like a multi-month project where we're going to do a lot of like rolling up our sleeves together, we might actually like go to a happy hour or do a team building or do something that allows the team to get to know one another and sort of build those kind of critical relationships outside of just sort of that the work product that needs to be delivered. And so when you sort of know the teammates that you're working with better, you understand what their goals are, understand what their skills that they can bring to the table, and then vice versa, what you can contribute to them, and then be really clear about accountability, like truly responsible and who's the decision maker, can help like get rid of some of that friction early that you might feel if you haven't taken that time to truly align early on in the upfront.
Excellent. Thank you, Jackie. Okay, so I'm going to transition it over to John Jones, Executive Director of Academic Programs, who's going to open up the conversation for our breakout rooms, I believe.
Yes, he is. And really quickly, I do know there are two other questions that were there in the chat that we didn't get to, and we can definitely do these in our breakout session, because I do think that Mike and Danny will be able to give their spin on some things too.
Excellent. Thank you, L'Oreal. I missed those.
Yeah.
Thank you guys so much for having me, Tiffany. It was such a lovely conversation. So
Thank
thank you.
you.
Thank you.
Yes.
That was great. We appreciate it, Jackie, as always. So I want to introduce a couple of additional program advisory board members that have joined us for the conversation. We have Mike Shady, who serves on our digital marketing program advisory board. And then we also have Danny Sanford, who serves on our FinTech program advisory board. So Mike and Danny have so graciously agreed to join us and help further the conversation, and then just provide some insights as well from from their own personal experiences in terms of navigating industry and the corporate environment around this topic. So with that, I'll let Mike and Danny introduce themselves, tell you a little bit more about their journey, and then we can dive into the session and just have more of a dialogue around this topic. So, Mike, why don't you go first?
Sure thing. Thanks for having me tonight. Really enjoyed the conversation so far. A lot of comments that Jackie threw out there resonate in a big way. I mean, I think a lot of us, as we're going through our careers, hit very common pinch points, right? That discussing it and having a little bit of background and a little bit of information about how other people have handled it is always a great thing. But for me, I've uh, been in leadership positions for many years now and have run into both sides of the situation now, which is fun. Coming up as a leader and now in a leadership role, dealing with those situations and trying to understand it from an alternate perspective has been fun. So I think we're going to have a lot of good conversation in the breakout and a number of things that we can dig a little bit deeper into based upon what we believe the group wants to hear more about.
Excellent. Thanks, Mike. All right, Danny, I think I'll see. Okay. Yeah, I was trying to find Danny in my window of tiles, but I see he's on and has joined
Oh,
us.
you guys got me now?
Mhm.
Okay. Um, So similar to some of the comments from Jackie around like the stretch opportunities, yeah, I've been fortunate to be in that position several times amongst many companies because I spent half my career in like Big Four consulting. Um, so that typically accelerates some of the opportunities for those experiences. And then most recently, the other half has been in industry, in corporate, in leadership roles. So seeing kind of both sides of that and how to communicate is one big piece of that pie that I think is really important in how you influence um, those around you and obviously influence your own reputation. It's all through communication. So looking forward to the breakout room discussion.
Okay, excellent. All right, and so given the group that we have here, I think it may work better if we just keep everybody together and facilitate the conversation that way, and then we can have Mike and Danny tag team as we kind of work through the breakout discussion. So, for the students who are on, if you all have additional questions that you think of, you can feel free to be able to drop those in the chat, and we can talk through those as well. We do have a few anchor questions just as we are kind of thinking about this topic that we want to have Mike and Danny be able to speak to and share. And so I'll start. Danny, I'll go back to you on this first one. Can you share a moment when understanding or missing the mark as it relates to organizational politics had a real impact on your career progress?
Yeah, I'll share probably one of my biggest misses. I think those are typically where more of the lessons are learned. I was early in my career in the corporate side, leading a strategy function for the bank. And within the team, we had what we thought was a really bright idea for a new market segment to go after, and spent a lot of time really fleshing out the opportunity. And then we realized like it conflicted with a kind of siloed corporate strategy team that, had the ear of the leadership team more than we did. And so when we kind of came in with our approach, it was very much like out of left field and completely opposite of some of the things that have been talked about in closed circles that we weren't necessarily a part of. And so, we didn't necessarily take it real well because we thought it was a great idea. But we also didn't have visibility into that. And so I think for us, it was really about, how do you sprinkle some of these ideas in small pieces to get like feedback as you go instead of kind of fully flushing and then taking it to a leader, as more of a surprise. And so that was certainly an opportunity to learn something and kind of coming out of that. It was really, again, I said it in the intro, like communication, how you communicate, what you communicate, when you communicate is really important to your success as a leader and growing in an organization.
Great for that. Thanks for that, Danny. And Mike, I know you've had experience in, some interesting context. So can you speak to that a little bit in terms of how, missing the mark as it relates to organizational politics has potentially impacted your career progress?
Yeah, I think there's been a number of instances over the years where you will notice this in particularly larger organizations, but it happens in small ones too, where there is always lobbying, there is always agendas, there's always things that are happening in the background that in certain cases you can find yourself aligned with someone that you don't necessarily completely agree is taking the right path. I mean, there's competitiveness in a lot of these in a lot of companies, and being able to understand how to be appropriately competitive, and at the same time understanding what is the right way of monitoring where you believe some of these allegiances need to be known, and make sure that you're aware of how that's going to potentially affect you in the future. I can't tell you the number of companies I've been with where you have seen, I mean, power struggle might be the right term, but you will face people that have a level of success in their mind that a lot of times, I mean, that will take precedent over a lot of the actions that they take. You've got to be aware of these things, and I'm not saying it happens all the time, but I mean, there is work is work. I mean, there is a big difference between people that are friendly and your friend, and you need to make sure that there's a differentiation between those things, particularly in an office place, and particularly in a place that might have some of those office politics that are playing. So I mean, there's a number of examples. I see a lot of head shaking. I mean, folks have dealt with things like this, I mean, consistently, and I think the more uh organizations that you are a part of, and the more that you witness, and the more that you grow in those organizations, the better you are at acknowledging that these situations are happening, and being aware of how you are associated with those is a skill that takes a little bit of time to be able to grasp onto. But the better and more quickly you recognize those things, the better off you can be in the way that you're positioning yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking to the fact that some folks are kind of nodding along to some of the comments you were making. So this breakout portion is intended to be a little bit more of a discussion. So for the students and others who are on the call, would anyone care to share what your experience has been on this topic? Just trying to add into the discussion or responding to anything that Mike or Danny shared in their comments.
I said it in the chat, but I've only worked for 2 organizations so far in my career. But with my new job that I've had for the last 3 years, kind of navigating that of what you thought was fun banter, friends type thing versus like actual harmful to morale and your organization itself, and realizing the difference between like jokes and fun and talking and politics of the actual organization. That was like a big lesson to learn that I'm still going through and still learning based on who I interact with at work. But that has been something that I didn't really even realize would be as big of an impact in my career as it has been. So learning to navigate that has been a bit of a challenge of trying to make sure you balance that, especially me being someone who's pretty extroverted and I like to talk to a lot of everyone at work. It's been a challenge to work with for sure.
Thanks for that, Tristan. Okay,
And,
anyone
and
else?
I'll comment on that. Like this, Danny. So there is, at least from what I've seen, and like granted, I spent half my career in consulting where, I was in leadership rooms in, top 10, mostly financial institutions. And so all of them had a different culture. And so how to like read the room, understand what banter may be appropriate to like establish a little bit of a personal connection before you get into business. Like that's important, and that doesn't fly in every culture. So really understanding the organization you're in and what works is important. But I will say, once you're in a leadership role, like you set the tone there. And Mike probably has a good perspective of that. And like I do that with my team. Certainly a little more towards like self-deprecating humor. So it's directed at me, not at others. And just honesty and transparency, and talk about personal family dynamics, like stuff that everyone can relate to. I think cuts a lot of tension, and people respect you for being more of a transparent, honest leader. But that's what works in my organization, and that's the tone I'm setting. But you really gotta like read the room and really understand how certain groups or even large corporations operate.
Yeah, absolutely. And before we move on to some of our breakout discussion questions, there were a couple of questions that we didn't get a chance to address in the chat. So I want to make sure we can circle back on some of those.
John,
So,
I see Jason has his hand up too. I'm not sure if it's relevant to what we were just talking through here.
okay. Yeah, Jason, go ahead and feel free to chime in.
It was more of a comment, Mike, kind of on, who's a friend and who's being friendly. But I have learned that as you're moving up and trying to move up, I think it's important to um, get your own perceptions of people. Sometimes as you're moving up, that person that you might necessarily think's a friend or being friendly, or they've got different motives. They'll say, this leader is hard to work with, or you don't want to go to this organization. I think it's important as you're moving up and trying to find your place to form your own opinions about individuals within each organization.
Mm,
A lot of times they're surprised, or people maybe had a bad experience, and that's not necessarily going to be yours.
very true.
I'd also add in that it's important to recognize when the culture might change, and it could be very subtle, whether it's new management or just acquisitions. And even if you're taking on the same name of the business and you don't really recognize that it's a different entity, new culture may come in, and if you're not quick to recognize it, it can bite you in the butt.
And I love Danny's comment, and Martin, you're spot on. I think the other thing is recognizing those moments that you can impact the culture yourself, like taking advantage of situations of leadership opportunities that you're being provided. I mean, there's varying levels of leadership that you can use your influence to be able to change certain situations. So I mean, it's always interesting just to see where you find yourself and then what control you really have of the situation by recognizing how the people around you are reacting to certain things and how you can potentially help them through some of those situations, similar to what Danny was talking about. There's preconceived notions that certain people have that might be inaccurate that you can help with.
All right. Good comments, good questions, and thanks for that, Mike. I think it was maybe Martin who had a question in the chat about what technique would you recommend for listening to tough feedback that could result in the type of strong mentor relationship that Jackie was referring to earlier. So, Mike, Danny, any thoughts about techniques for being able to listen to and then incorporate feedback that may be a bit tough?
I'm happy to go. I've gotten some very tough feedback over the years, and I think the thing that you've got to do is welcome that, right? Jackie has it spot on. I mean, the tougher the feedback, most of the time has turned out to be some of the best feedback I've received. You've got to be able to ensure that you're taking it the right way, though. You've got to be able to actively listen to what they're saying and actually understand what they're saying. You might be able to hear it, but if you're not in the right frame of mind to understand, you might be missing an opportunity to be able to take that and run with it. I always make sure that if I've received something which I've considered tough feedback, that I am like completely in sync with the way that they're talking about it. So make sure I'm understanding it, and then I follow up. Right? I think it's a great opportunity for you to be able to come back and speak to specifics that you have done to be able to react to that feedback and get that individual's reaction, understanding how they initially interpret what they believe that feedback is and how that potentially evolves as you show them what you've done to adapt to the feedback and move through it, I think is super important. But I mean, everybody's always heard that feedback is a gift, right? I mean, it honestly is, but it's one of those gifts that's really hard to get sometimes, and it's just something that over the years you gotta grow that thick skin. You gotta ensure that you've got a little bit of uh, the quarterback mentality, right? One bad pass doesn't mean that you've lost the game. You got to forget about that, get back in, and start working through those next steps to be able to improve. But having an understanding of what specifically you can do and ensuring that hits the mark with the individual that gave you the feedback is a good first step.
Well, and to add to that, Mike, like the person giving the feedback, if it is tough feedback, they've been thinking about that for a while.
Mhm.
Typically, like you know, hopefully it's not like off the cuff, like a lash out kind of feedback, and it's thoughtful, focused, like, and direct. And so, the fact that they're taking the time to give you that feedback also means that they want to see you improve. They're invested in you. So you have to
Yes.
take that angle as well. I actually got some in the last few weeks from a leader in my organization, and I followed up the next day, like, kind of recognizing, like, okay, this is what I heard you say. This is how I interpreted it. Like, you know, if this is not like what you're communicating, like, let me know, and then I can focus on how do I apply that. So it's like recognize and digest it, make sure you understand it, and then you can more easily apply it. And people will respond to that 100% of the time. If they spend the time to give you the feedback, they will spend the time to make sure, like, you're in sync on what it means and how to go forward.
No, that's a great point, Danny. The idea, a couple of things. One, that if people are giving that feedback in that way, it's something that they've probably been ruminating on for a little while. And then that I think a lot of times when we hear things that may come across as negative to us, that we associate it with some type of ill intent, when in many instances it's the exact opposite, that they have our best interests in mind. They want to support our growth and development. So those are great points to keep in mind. When it comes to organizational politics, there are often things that are more kind of visible and overt, but then there's also the stuff that's behind the scenes and doesn't necessarily get said. So what's one unwritten rule that you've had to learn, or in some instances unlearn, that shaped your success and where you are in your career today?
I think there's a few. Um, the one that, like, comes to mind for me, um, it's we're often valued and appreciated for expertise in a certain area. Like, you become an expert leader, an expert at your craft, an expert in your subject, and you put all that together. And if you could manage others in that same expertise, like, that's how you grow as a leader. But that's not how you communicate it. And oftentimes, engaging with leaders, like, it's less about proving and communicating what you want them to hear, and more really focusing on what they need to hear to make a decision. So what the more senior I engage with, the less communication, and, like, shorter the communication tends to be, because it's literally like need to know only. And so you got to recognize that. Leaders are not going to read long communications. And so how do you that's a big one, like, because you're often valued for, like, your expertise, but you got to focus on what you're trying to communicate versus what leaders need to understand and receive to make decisions. And I think understanding the kind of leader you have, some are very analytical, some are more drivers, more innovators. Like, you really got to understand the kind of brain chemistry aligned to that person, to know how to engage with them appropriately. And at least in my organization, we did kind of this, I forget the term, but it was kind of a brain chemistry, personality profile. And it was all about, like, how people perceive each other, not about, like, my personality type, but how others perceive me and how I want to be perceived. And that really helped. Understanding that really helps you interact with leaders more effectively and efficiently. I think that's been pretty important for us, and it's different for each kind of leader type. So you really got to spend the time to get to know people before you actually get to know them.
And Mike, any follow-up thoughts on that? particular question.
Yeah, one thing, and I probably got two answers to it, but the one, and I'd say this may be a learning that's out there that a lot of people know, but actually learning it is tough. But Danny hit on it. Like the tone that you set with your team and the way that you lead your team is probably the number one biggest thing that's going to have an effect on your current like job plus your extended career. Somebody made a mention earlier about how it's a small world. I think Jackie said that hey, the person that you might be working with as a peer might eventually be a direct report. The world is a lot smaller than you think. And I think one of the areas that I've run into is just how important treating people in a positive way for the duration of your career really comes back to help you in the end. Uh, Folks will go all over the place, but that network that you create, if you've got a strong bond and you treated that person with respect, you treated that person fairly, you came in, and if you were in a leadership role, took kind of the approach that Danny was talking about, like it's servant leadership is what I kind of think about. I'm part of the group. I'm not leading the group. I will sit here and make jokes about myself. I will be one of the group, and I'm not going to give you anything that I'm not willing to do myself. Thinking through how that attitude uh, is pervasive on your team, and if you do it appropriately, will carry through, and you will find people that come back and give you opportunities and suggest things throughout the time frame that you're there. I mean, the retail space that I work in is a huge small world, and there's people that I know in many companies now through projects that we worked on over the years together. And if you do good work and treat those people with respect, that goes a very long way, particularly as you advance in your career. So, if anything, I think it's probably the unwritten rule that I always follow. I'm glad that I followed it back when I was starting, is because the person that you get when you talk to me, then it's the same person you get now. I've tried to make sure that there's not ego that gets put in play. You try to make sure that you're part of the team, try to make sure that I'm doing as much work as the other person, and I'm sitting here trying to do a little bit more because my job is to unblock problems for my team to be able to get things done and make them successful. If they're successful, I'm successful, and in the end, it's something you can carry with you for quite a while.
If I could, John, I'd love to just jump in and address another question that was in the chat. And Hui Jiao, you had two different questions. And one, I'm hoping that we can address first, the latter of the two, because it's dealing with conflict. And you asked, as a candidate from the academic field, how do you think your scholarly background can help you address conflicts between politics and business? And so I'm going to throw this out there, and Mike and Danny, feel free to jump in. But I also think some of our academic directors might have some insights to this, and they too, a few of them are on the call. Any takers? I'm just going to start calling on you then, because that's what I do. I really think this is important though, because conflict, right, is something that we all deal with. And so I think it's an important thing that we want to address. Adam, I'm going to ask you to come off of picture mute and jump in and give your perspective, please.
So, I mean, for transparency, I come from the education background, like K-12 school education. So I'm not a business guy here by any means, but conflict is certainly no stranger to being a principal, which I was. So, while I can't speak from the business side necessarily, coming from the academic field and from just the education side, I think understanding where people are coming from when we're talking conflicts, understanding their perspective is really important. Understanding that different side, everyone's got their own story to tell. And when we're looking to the question of how do you address conflicts between politics and business, for me, it's looking at what is this person coming to me from? Is it their personal background, their personal experiences, their biases, and I don't mean that in a negative way, just their personal biases. What comes to the table when they are engaging in a conflict? And one thing as a principal that I always brought to the table is what I call a conflict positive workplace. And what I mean by that is making conflict an acceptable means of communication. Because I think conflict has, in just our society, conflict has a very negative connotation, and I don't feel it needs to. And so conflict, at least for me in my building as a principal, meant that we can bring things to each other. I think Mike and Danny and everyone that's spoken tonight have really spoken to the point that we can have conversations. Feedback is not always a negative thing. And so when we have the chance to engage in discourse, if we use that word conflict, we at least present it in a way that's going to be a positive, productive outcome. So.
Yeah, I'll add on to that. I mean, I think conflict in my mind, like while it typically has negative connotations, like I think it's a positive thing, because that means there's people with passion, creating some friction, and where there's friction, there's a little heat, and that means people are vested. And as long as we are communicating respectfully and listening to really understand each other's opinion, that's the important thing. I kind of like, there's a parallel to like married life. Like when, if I'm arguing with my wife, it's better than not talking at all. Like arguing is a good thing. We're talking, and we'll talk through it as long as we do it respectfully. Same thing in the workplace. Like if the conflict is like behind closed doors, like that's a problem. If the conflict is out in the open and people are given space to respectfully communicate their opinions, like that's super important. You're always going to have it. You can't avoid it. Frankly, I don't want to avoid it. I want to encourage it, but I want to encourage it in a productive manner, because everyone is entitled to an opinion if they can back their opinion up with facts and justification.
Well, I was going to add to that too. I'm going to answer in two ways. So the first way is I've spent my career in marketing and advertising, and a phrase that I've heard, and I think it's important in marketing. The best ideas come from the most ideas. And if you have a conflict avoiding organization, you're not going to get a lot of real good ideas, right? So you have to embrace conflict, whether it's over work issues or other issues or on ideas. Because I can tell you, I was late tonight because I was teaching a class and we did a breakout session on Burt's Bees cosmetics. And the whole point of the exercise was the students that were men really didn't know what they were talking about, and they really needed to put themselves in the shoes of being a female consumer for that project, right? And so that's conflict right there, right? And that's really important to do, and good stuff. The other thing I was going to answer in politics. Politics also could mean stuff that happens in Washington, D.C., and that's dangerous also, but very important. A lot of my customers sell things that go in homes, and everybody wants to know if the Fed's going to cut the rate and if mortgage rates are going to come down. So people sell more homes so that we have more people shopping at Home Depot, Lowe's, Walmart, and Amazon, right? You can't avoid talking about that at work. And some of the people I work with are left, some of the people I work with are right. And so you got that dangerous political thing too. But again, bringing it back to the best ideas come from the most ideas, and the most points of view, I think, is really, really important, and leaning into that's important.
I think one point to add into that, Jed, that I run into a lot, is the same thing. You'll find extremes from a political viewpoint, but if you can rally people around what's best for the business and try and keep that in mind, like let's set a goal of what we're trying to hit from an objective and kind of back away from it. It typically helps kind of drive a little bit more of that positive conversation around what the solution might be, or where you might need to go from a idea generation perspective, that helps bring that best result of what the goodness that can come out of that conflict actually is.
Yep, absolutely.
I think there's a great saying in at least getting ideas out there for a business is there's no such thing as a bad idea. Because once you immediately start labeling that within any organization, less people are going to want to throw ideas out there because maybe they don't know if it is a good idea, maybe they don't have that insight while someone else does, and that may discourage them from going forward. And at least within the Kaizen aspect, right? You want to have an idea that day, even if someone knows it might not work. You can kind of work through it to see, um, find that actual evidence to say that well, this doesn't work, and we tried it this way instead. Because if not, that will create conflict and tension on teams to the point where no one wants to contribute.
I think those are all great points. And there was, I think, am I correct, L'Oreal? I think there's one additional question from the chat that we wanted to address.
I believe it's further up. Hui Zhao, did you have another question? And if so, you can take yourself off mute and ask it directly. That might be easier than me trying to find it at this point. And also happy to address any other questions.
Oh, actually, it's okay because I think I am the only one international student. And yeah, I just have the question is talking about how do you think an international student can deal with the challenges of, start a small business or become the leader in the other, culture or country? And what kind of support, what kind of the support can you help them into the, workplace or marketing faster? That's my questions.
I can start. I've got a little experience here. I lived and worked in Finland for a couple years, and I'll tell you the one thing that I took away from there was that I needed to assimilate in. I needed to be part of the conversation that they were having in the office and kind of blend and figure out the right way to be able to one show like that I was willing to learn about the ways of working, the ways that they thought about ideation, the way that their days ran. There's a different world that you need to, adopt to a little bit. I think there's a portion of that that rings true just with the way that offices work, the way that business works. But there's cultural norms that were expected of me there that I think the sooner that I figured that out, the smoother certain things went in the very beginning. So I think that's for me. I go. I did it much younger in my career. I think it was something that was a bit of a shock to my system because I wasn't really even that savvy in the ways of business. Period. And now I'm in a very different cultural environment, trying to navigate that as well. But I found out that one big thing for me is being like your true self, being personal to those folks, making those initial relationships. It just helps the process of getting involved in those office relationships easier right up front. So I don't know. For me, that was a tactic that I used, and I really kind of pressed into that pretty hard when I first arrived in country.
Mike, did you have like a mentor throughout that process? Like, somebody at the firm or the company you were at that kind of like helped assimilate you, or were you kind of just charging yourself? Like, I think having some kind of mentor or advocate helps.
I had a local the business I was working with assigned me a professor at a school actually that spoke conversational English. Uh, for them, Finland, I think they teach 7 different languages through grade school and college, and they basically gave me him as a cultural representative and just kind of told me about the way that certain things work. I mean, it's a very reserved country. So just being able to navigate relationships is a very unique thing there. There's not a lot of openness. It's a very stoic place. I mean, you got to get to know people, and he was a great help in the very beginning to get me over the first couple of months, because it was definitely different than growing up in New York.
Yeah. I think the only other comment I'd add to that, Troy, is like be vocal, like you know, express that desire, be honest with the team you're working with, the company you want to work with. Like you want to understand the culture, and you vocalize that, somebody will recognize and support you through that. If you try to kind of figure it out on your own, that's going to be a harder path.
I was just gonna add, actually, one of the people in my lab is from Libya and came as a transfer international worker for a couple years, and he dived right into our lab and like learned how we do things differently in our lab versus like that country and their processes. And by diving into it and through like the support of everyone within our lab, because he's a fantastic man. So everyone was very supportive and very helpful for him. And working hard, he ended up becoming like a full-time employee, and this happened before I got there. And actually, as of last year, he became one of our seniors. So through working hard and learning our lab and our processes and the support within our organization, he was able to rise in it and become like one of our leaders. And he's fantastic. So I think our organization saw that within him and supported that, and that's what led him into the position he was, because he dived fully into the culture here. And I'm sure the culture that he had helped him in different ways here, but he just dived right into that, and that was, I think, really helpful for him.
It goes both ways too. Like as a leader, you've got to understand that dynamic. Like half of my organization sits in India. The other half is in the US. And so I need to understand that. Like otherwise I'm not doing my job as a leader. So understanding how my team operates over there and making them feel recognized and appreciated, and give them the same level of responsibility of our teams in the US, with the same level of expectation, like is the baseline foundation. Like it has to be that way. And then how can I understand how they may do things a little differently to achieve the same outcomes? But that's on me to understand and invest my time with them, and tell them like I want to learn and get to know how you guys operate, and how I can be better with you. How am I communicating or not communicating in a way that supports the cultural norms of my teams over there.
No, I think
Yeah.
go ahead.
Oh, no, nothing. I just wanted, thank you for those answer that were truly insightful.
Excellent. So we are coming up on our time. I want to make sure that we are able to bring this to a close. So Mike, Danny, if you had just one piece of advice that you would give our students, our participants, as a takeaway around this notion of organizational politics and being able to grow your influence within the organization, what would you say, or what would you share?
From my end, I think about this as the better you can portray your true self, the easier it's going to be able to do the things you need to do. And I think that Jackie mentioned this as well. There's a lot that you can gain from being a well-rounded person and taking some of those really hard jobs that nobody wants. You gain influence by a number of different ways, but broad experience and getting in and showing that you can roll your sleeves up and get into work is a great way to be able to impress many of the people that you're going to work with, and that will last with you for a long time. It helps you get around politics when you've been someone who's been seen as a person who gets stuff done and a person who will take on hard jobs. A lot of that really will perpetuate just your reputation and not just inside your current company, but like I was saying before, on the outside of that company, you will be known as a person that can really contribute to the team.
Yeah, that's great.
I mean, I 100% agree with Mike on that. Like attitude is everything. Like that's being willing to do things that nobody else wants to do. Like that's where you grow the most. Have a good attitude is going to be infectious for those around you and your leaders, and that goes a long way.
Those are great pieces of advice. And with that, we'll go ahead and wrap up the conversation. But I do want to point out or bring attention to a few resources and upcoming events. So we have the Pearl Cafe Career Hub. Students, if you haven't had a chance to go and check that out, please do so. I also want to mention Wake 360, which is applicable to everybody here, our faculty, our staff, students, PAB members. We'd love to see everybody October 24th through 25th in Charlotte for our Wake 360 event. That's where we bring the entire Wake School of Professional Studies community together. It's going to be a really fun day of fun couple of days of learning, engagement, networking, and strengthening our community. And then also, we'd love to get feedback as we continue to enhance and add more value through this SPSConnect series. So the QR code is on the screen. Please, if you get a chance, scan the QR code, fill out the brief survey, provide us with your feedback. We do value it. We take it into account and use it in our planning as we look forward to future events. And then we have one final SPSConnect session for this year. It's going to be on December 3rd. That one's going to take place during the lunch hour. It's going to be another virtual event. And the topic of that event is going to focus on building a career of meaning, which I think is something that we're all striving for. So that's going to be a really, really great conversation during that event. And so with that, L'Oreal, Chris, Tiffany, any parting thoughts as we're wrapping up?
None from me as far as parting thoughts, but I just want to say thank you so much to Tiffany for your moderation this evening. The conversation between you and Jackie was fabulous. And then thank you to Mike and Danny for continuing that conversation. And of course, to our participants this evening, our students, we really appreciate you joining us and being active participants